Hello. Good to see you. Mm.
Nice to see everybody.
Hope you're well.
Hope you all got lots of candy.
I didn't get one.
You didn't get candy? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't get a box. I definitely did. Good idea, though. Hmm.
Just tricks.
Yeah, got some tricks. Hmm. Don't forget to look at the other page if you want to see everyone feel the support of the Sangha.
And thanks for everyone for making the time adjustment, for folks who are not in Hawaii. I know it's sort of like it can be tricky to even 1 hour difference. It becomes a regular thing. So thanks for being flexible.
Well, we didn't, in Hawaii, you don't change time, so we don't get that extra hour of sleep in October. The benefit, the one benefit. Mm. So let's get started. I think we're going to start with a little bit of loving kindness today. Of course, at first, just letting your attention settle within your body or around your body. Letting the attention settle in where it's naturally drawn anywhere within your body or the space around your body. Sometimes it's helpful to place your hand fingertips on your heart center, which I'm doing if you don't know what I mean. The loving kindness is a foundational connecting with our heart, mind, chitta. And it can be helpful to receive the touch there, the touch of your attention, your fingertips, if they're there. So that at first, we're just trying to receive kindness there, a tenderness. It doesn't have to be intense. Often that's where we go off. It can be very, very light, just quiet connection. Like receiving a sound, receiving kindness, tenderness, care. And that can be enough or plenty. So if the attention wanders, when you notice it, you just come back to this sense of quiet connection. Tenderness, care. And just for today, This is a very light, loving kindness. The phrase, may I be safe and protected from inner and outer harm, can be very helpful. If you don't relate to it, of course, no need. But if you do, it's like it takes a kind of deeper concentration to feel the meaning of that individually. Safe from inner harm means safe from getting lost in attachment or aversion or fear, lost. And if we are bringing as much loving kindness, care, wisdom to any inner harm, doubt, and sometimes we can experience metta for any outer harm, care, compassion. It's a general wish, just wishing, bringing this kindness within our whole body, caring about any pain, appreciating any joy. And a deep peace with things as they are. As I move on, it's fine if you want to just notice attention wandering, coming back to a tender kindness, care, quiet connection anytime. We'll be shifting to that wisdom practice, shifting to hearing, silence, sound. You might notice how the tenderness can affect the quality of our awareness, the quality of our connection. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, just allowing the textures, vibrations come and go just as they are. the sensations within our hand. Sometimes there can be a greater calm. And just letting the attention settle there. And shifting to the movement of the breath at our abdomen without forcing the attention. The attention can be open and wide, or right within the movement. Shifting from that, the words like hands or breath. Of course, words, descriptions arise and pass, thoughts come and go. And then let the attention settle within. The unknown emergence of newborn sensations. They come and go just as they are. Never again the same sensations. There's that allowing of however the sensations appear. So with thought, it's never again the same thought. But we can see what it's like to just not believe them for a while. Relating to the thinking more like sound. Of course, we discern thinking. What is helpful, what is not. But sometimes it's interesting to just not believe any for a while. The inner harm can disappear for a while. And with emotion, it's often the non attending them with kindness, with allowing. And again, being careful of getting lost, just letting the emotions come and go without feeding them or shutting them down. Understanding them. Mostly it's helpful to be with the physical sensation of them that correspond in the appearance of a thought with them or thoughts. And finding that space of being with hands, breath, sound as an anchor. So we really can care and let them appear and disappear like sounds, breath, thought. Peace.
Thank you, Michelle. Mm. So we thought it would be a good week maybe to check in with folks, see if anyone had any questions, any way we might be able to support you in your practice and your managing of things and life in the world. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, we have some time. Um, the best way, as usual, to let us know is there's a button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you move your mouse around, that says react, and there is a raise hand option there, so you can see that, or just like Julia has done, or type into the chat that you have a question, we'll call on you, or look like you're trying to do something, and then we'll see that and we'll try to call on you. Let me see, unmute themselves. Great. Hey, Julia. Let's see. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi,
Jesse.
Julia.
Hi, Michelle. I guess I can lower my hand. Um,
Oh, you know what? Actually, can you keep your hand raised because
yeah.
it makes you stay up on the corner there, and it's easier to track people while you're
Okay.
talking.
Oh, but now, oh, there it is. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Um, so, um, thank you for being. Um, I guess I have I think of you all there at Vipassana Hawaii and this Sangha as good at being lay people while aware of upholding ethics in life. And so I guess this is a question, sort of a general, few little like anecdote things I'm curious about. So I live in a group of 5 little cabins, and they're like nice studios, apartments on the inside, but they look kind of like cabins on the outside. And we have kind of a cool creative neighborhood on our one block of pavement, but sometimes interpersonal things come up. So like I guess I did 2 things today that concerned. I know it's not confession, but I had strong feelings that things needed to be said, and so I said them. And I'm like, I wonder what Jesse and Michelle or the people in this group. Okay, so one is that the landlord is doing something illegal. And so I went out for tea with the woman in the cabin behind me, and I mentioned that. Um, and I don't know if she knew, and it's affecting me. So I don't know if it was Pisunawa cha, I don't mean it in a backbiting or calumnious way. But I did mention it. And then the other thing is that this woman doesn't vote. Um, and the only people I know that don't vote in this country are people who had terrible childhoods. And we have a good relationship. And I've noticed that sometimes I'll say something and she'll start doing it. And so I feel this obligation to sort of be present for her. But at the same time, so I said, the only people, I didn't know for sure that she didn't vote, but I said, the only people I know in this country who don't vote are people who had really rotten childhoods. And she's like, yep, that's me, you know. So, and then I kind of went into why I feel like in a democracy that it's useful to participate, and how there's room for discussion and disagreement, and how by raising our voices and exercising our voices, that's what keeps the process alive. So anyway, those are two things that I wasn't sure about the ethics. One is telling her that the landlord was doing something illegal, and we're all really, well, some of us are quite sensitive, so like we can feel when another one of us is a little bit tense, kind of, in the 5 cabins. Anyway, that's my question. Thanks.
I'm sure Michelle will both have something to say. I mean, it's not a lot of information in some ways to go on in terms of, or with the information given, there's a lot of sort of ambiguity still, right? I mean, I think that there's always this sense of like, what is said, the way it's said, what's the motivation for saying it? I mean, ethics and the carefulness and desire to be careful and yet still engage with people who might just have not shared views or not shared ethical kind of commitments or whatever. I mean, there's such a range of the direction that we can explore these things in. So I think of this in like so many questions. It's not like kind of like you said, like you're not asking us, and I think it's important. It's like it doesn't feel like there's like a kind of any clear like ethical violation, right? That it seems like you committed today. uh, you know, and and life is like this endless, or thankfully not endless, at some point ending, for the time being, like series of events like this where we have interactions that complex things come up for us and that we have our own complex relationships with and understandings of and motivations around, and sometimes it's not totally clear what our what our intention is in terms of the way we're communicating with someone and what is at the root of that and our own psychology. So I think the sense of like wanting to be careful and wanting to not harm and wanting to also be skillful and wanting to engage people in a way that feels is respectful, dignified, kind, generous, but not necessarily, but maybe still also like, reflecting some value that we have that someone else might not share, and how to do that. I mean, I think there's many ways of going about it. So I don't know exactly kind of what to say about, I mean, I think the quality of this illegal act that your landlord is doing, I mean, I have no idea. So the question of like, how is it illegal and immoral? Is it?
It's not huge.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah.
huge, but
Right. But so
yeah.
to share that or to speak that with someone, and especially if your intention is actually to try to build some kind of response to that as a collective thing, then that feels totally appropriate. If you're ambiguous about why you might be bringing it, like, does it just feel like gossip? Does it feel like this? Or is there a sense of like, oh, maybe people might want to confront or approach or whatever this person? Yeah, I mean, as far as the information given, sure, I mean, and yes, there's a way to do that. There's a way to that can be gossipy, right? That can be just sort of like trying to seed negative feelings about someone else. And that is something to be careful with, right? Of which side of that are we on? The sense of, I mean, I'll just say I know a lot of people who have rotten childhoods who vote. So I don't know about the analysis there, but I think that the sense of wanting to have a conversation about like civic responsibility and civic duties and hear their take on it. Or most people will be more responsive to that kind of conversation if they don't feel like they're being sort of like pigeonholed or psychoanalyzed. I mean, I would say that's a general thing. This is your friend though, and I don't know how, if you have a way that you feel like you're able to engage her in conversations, and I don't know the sort of details of that. And yet, of course, I mean, there's something about that question that is like, there's probably no one here who doesn't have some, whether it's to vote or how we're voting or, well, I mean, this is of course a huge question and huge tension in many relationships right now. And, are elements of this same dynamic. And how do you have conversations with people around it? Where are we attached to them behaving like we want them to behave? Where is that perhaps righteous? Where is that perhaps flawed? I mean, there's a lot of layers to that, but I do think in some ways where I will end and kind of where I hear you saying or expressing is you are in a community of people, a small community of people, and you value the relationships. You understand that it's complicated and that you need to be careful of how you tread, because a schism in a small group like that can be very difficult, very hard to manage. And so this question of like, where are we permissive? Where are we confrontational? Where are we, how do we negotiate these things, especially in a small community in which the relationships are ones you don't want to just rupture? That yes, more care, more patience, less immediate need of behavioral change, unless it's like actual harm, that's immediate, an immediate impact is the concern. Those things tend to be more helpful, but that we're all like, most of us are very imperfect in our ability to do it, and these are things that we care about, and so we get riled up, and they trigger all kinds of our own upbringings and dynamics and psychology. So it's hard, and if we've harmed, how do we repair as quickly as possible? How do we ask for forgiveness and be humble and those things? So, I mean, I guess I just hear that sense that you care. It's like that if that's the case, that you want to be careful, but you also want to be honest. You want these to be real relationships. You don't want to just sort of let things like not pretend that things don't matter to you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also like, if I'm in the role in this particular relationship with my neighbor of being kind of like the stable one who listens and holds space, I mean, there is a part of me that would like it if people vote, and so I have to own that. I mean, can you be a good friend? Like, is it wrong to nudge someone? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's it all. I wouldn't say that there's, maybe just to be careful about thinking that there is a 100% answer to that in every relationship and every friendship. That every friendship we're negotiating these things in different ways. And I'd say for me, yes, that most of that it's important for I understand that if there is a friendship or relationship of any kind, familial, right, in my life that I can't have some conflict in and have that be okay and have that be something that we work through. If that's not acceptable, right, then there's a distance there. It's just not going to be the same kind of intimate connection. And that maybe that's actually totally appropriate for some relationships. And that might be disappointing, but that at some point we might realize like, oh, actually this relationship isn't capable of that. And this relationship is. And so that this might be more messy, it might look more complicated, but that there's a dynamism to it that might be something you value. That's great. But to be careful about thinking every relationship needs to have a certain standard of expectation of your wholeness or something. It just doesn't, to me, I'd say that hasn't felt realistic, and I haven't seen it work.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Michelle,
There's messes and the strong fabric underneath.
yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, I would just amplify that if we're attached to our view, attached to our opinion, that saying, the great way is easy for those who cease to cherish, cease to cherish their views and opinions, right? That, this was a great teaching of the Buddha, not being attached to your views and opinion. That's like a basic Buddhist teaching. So that, like, I would question the assumption that all people who don't vote have had rotten childhoods. I think it's too big an assumption.
Well, I was just
Right.
stating the truth of my experience so far.
Right.
Yeah,
But I think
wasn't. Yeah.
to approach somebody like that, like with that, I think is, for some people, would be offensive, for example. 'Cause, like, if you really want them to vote, you might leave that out, like with some people, and you might own that you're attached to them voting. Like, there's a lot of ways to approach conversation, but
Yeah.
the more you can be aware, like Jesse said, I think motivation is
Yeah.
everything. If we don't really scour our motivation first
Yeah.
in these kind of situations,
Yeah.
then we're not making any possibility for a good conversation, to me. That's all. I mean, I think you're describing the stuff of life and the difficulty in living with people and wanting to, like Jesse said, have like honest conversations, and it's important, and um, but I think to be very careful of assumptions, even if it's like our own experience. I could say, well, all Scorpios, all people born in November are such and such. But if I approach somebody like that, it's not necessarily an opening,
Yeah.
right? So that's all. I think that's all I would say. That I think you're not describing. The Buddha described like appropriate speech and inappropriate speech. And you didn't go, it doesn't sound like you went into inappropriate speech,
Yeah.
but really looking at intention, especially when when you're in a small community, it's very different than in a large anonymous city, right? Like it's sometimes something you say in a small community stays in the wall for 400 years practically, right? It's a very different, it's like really being mindful of your milieu, you know.
Yeah.
That's great. I think it's great
That
that
makes
you
sense.
brought it up.
I really appreciate the part about scouring the motivation. Yeah. Yeah, because I think the conversation was effective in terms of like, well, it's weird because um I feel like we should never really want to like engage with someone if you have any intention at all to change them. But I sort of have to own that I did, and I think it worked. But maybe you're right. Maybe, well, yeah, I should just investigate more about the approach, and yeah, and maybe I shouldn't have done it that way. It could have been wrong use of power. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
It's because you've explained that you feel like you're in a certain relationship with her, that you have some kind of sense of authority in the relationship. Yeah, I think it's always an interesting, important question of how you're using that sense of respect or authority, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Mhm. Kate.
Um, I I finally have been able to sit for a little bit. It's been really surprising. The progress was, I think, happening for 6 months or so, and before that seemed like almost impossible to have formal practice time or even within that to sit. Um, and I noticed just like rising and touching and falling, hearing like that never occurred to me that that would help for many years, and it's so helpful. Um, uh, but yeah, with that, and it doesn't feel like I ever stopped practicing. There's like a sense of faith and sense of very subtle energy or curiosity going on for sure. Even with that, like the time that was too intense to practice. And when because like for 3 years or so, my practice was like, oh, to be with uncertainty, to be with uncertain as much as possible, whether it can't be still or not. And what's coming to my practice is that like I don't want to be like I don't want uncertainty. And like that becomes so clear. And I think that's been kind of like very sweet progress for understanding over 2, 3 years. And um when I'm talking to somebody, like it'll be 6 years. Um it'll be 6 years since I last saw my parents, and um, I definitely want to control their response to what's been happening with my gender transition, um, and yes, like you can't control, you can't control. Like I know, and like a lot of people, in therapeutic sense or like a lot of supportive situation. They pointed out that like you can't control, and it's like yes I know, like for anything I should know that I can't control, but like I have a hard time like having any dialogue around that, but because I want to be bluntly honest that I want to control it. And yeah, and the there's certain like doubt that like do you actually think that it's normal not to want to have control like over something like that? Like I see with that identification and aversion, I do see certain care and like self-preservation and defense for sure. So um yeah, I'm having hard time again, I think engaging with like outside yogi world sometimes, and that's seems to progress over the years. So I just wanted to ask, or yeah.
Yeah, totally. Great. I think we'll both, I mean, that sense of like, being accepting and being honest with ourselves that we want to control. You know, it's like, it's so important. It's so basic. It's so fundamental. It's like, of course you want to control. How ridiculous would it be to just think you don't want to control? And then like right next to that is how, I want to be careful about like the word ridiculous, but just how in unrealistic it is to just say, well, you can't control it, so you shouldn't want to control it. Like that you can just like tell yourself that, or one can tell themselves that you should just be equanimous and not want things to be a certain way. I mean, it's just so counter, even though it's true ultimately that we cannot control how people like it just the basic the what you're describing in terms of, you know, how your parents are going to respond and be in relationship with you in this transition. You know, it's like, of course you want to control that. And for exactly the reasons you're describing. It's like self-protection and this, like what Michelle said, it's like, may I be safe from inner and outer harm as the fundamental one of these phrases of the loving kindness practice. Like that's so good. You know what I mean? It's so good that actually you want to control because you care about yourself, right? It's like, how is that pathologized? Like, how does that become something that's like considered neurotic? You know, where you're like, no, I care about myself, and I know how I can be wounded, and I would prefer not that, you know. So I think, you know, I know that we both would just feel totally, it's so beautiful the way you describe. It's like coming to this place of just acknowledging and recognizing that of course you want to control, you know. And even in the practice, it's a paradox, you know, that we're trying to just be with things as they are, but there's a lot of method, right? And you just described one way in which like the method is a form of manipulation that can be helpful, right? Where it's like, rather than just be subject to all of everything happening, it's like you note, oh, rising, increasing pressure, decreasing pressure, right? That is like a management tool, right? Of this whole the wilderness of experience that we're subject to in our minds, hearts, bodies. And so, yeah, this sense of we're on retreat and there are rules, right? The silence, the way we're supposed to operate with each other when we're, you know, yogis, the way we're supposed to be respectful of the space, you know, it isn't just a free-for-all. There is a sense that actually, in order for people to feel safe enough to let go of control, you have to provide a structure that's safe, that's enough. I mean, it's like there is no perfectly safe structure, and you have to be careful about the over uptightness of that for sure. But it's like there's a reason why we do that. Or even, you know, when I was traveling, I went to a friend has started a little Zen sitting group in his community, and so I went and sat with them, and I forgot, you know, they sit with their eyes open, and and I didn't like it. And now there's more to be said about it. I could sort of like, I get it, right? I get why it's like you're just, you know, you're trying to just be with everything. And but I also see the way in which we are so visually oriented and trained that actually shutting the eye door is helpful in terms of kind of getting a little bit out of the sense of, you know, some of these tendencies and dynamics. So it's just like a little metaphor of that, of like actually a certain amount of protection, a certain amount of cloistering, a certain amount of control can help provide a sense of safety enough that we can then, the heart can start to feel like it can let go of control from inside, not as a command, you know. And so what you're describing of like, you know, of course, with your family, it's like, what are the contexts? What are the conditions under which you might have,
you might be able to visit or see or connect or talk or whatever that feel like are safe enough, that are gonna, it's not gonna be perfect, but that might be providing enough security and stability that is controlled enough to feel safe to do it, and still risk something, right? Still know that yes, you are opening up, and that there's an idea that that it might be worth risking something in a safe enough container. So it's just to say that like this question of control and safety and letting go of that yeah, it's a very powerful place, and you can see how much practice it takes to even understand that. And so of course people don't understand that. Of course people just say, well, you can't control it, don't, whatever they say. Where it's like, okay, you could just tell people not to want to control, but it's like, and that might have some value, but you're in a deeper place with this dynamic and dance between the sort of inner and outer and the social and the internal. That's very powerful and vulnerable, but that you're getting and have gotten, this sense of like, of course you want to control, and that there's actually good reasons that can be rooted in caring, not just wanting. It's not just wanting to control, it's like wanting to protect, and that requires some management, that requires some conditions for the heart to be at ease with that. Michelle, do you have more you wanna?
I
Yeah.
do. I have more of
Yeah.
a it's so bad it's funny kind of story, but like it's like I really feel like, it's one thing to like have difficult conversations with, like you say, in the yogi world, or like you have some sense that's not going to shift into blame and shame, or like, there's some semblance of dignity. But one time I decided to have a conversation with my dad other than the weather. I literally had never had a conversation with my dad, and with a lot of like a lot of trauma in this family for years, and it was later on in my life, but it took so much courage. That's one thing I just want to say. Like, it's going to take a lot of courage, and hopefully, you know, it won't go as far south as mine went. But it's really kind of funny because I decided I didn't want to do it in his house, and so I asked him, I didn't really say much about what we were going to talk about. I just said it'd be nice to have a conversation about something other than the weather. I said it. So he picked this ice cream shop in downtown Framingham, and I was like, okay. So then, like, we had a time, and I'm sure we were both like super anxious, but I'm waiting there for like an hour. He doesn't show up, and then I look outside, and he's like, he couldn't even go inside. He was so anxious he couldn't even go inside, and I had no idea. I was so much in my own little world of what my own, like you say, like wanting to control somewhat of what was going to happen. So I went outside, and I said, "Well, where would you like to go?" And he picked this park right on a busy street. So we're sitting on a bench, like again, downtown Framingham, Massachusetts, like with this busy street, and it's like so not. I wished I had picked his house at that point. Like, I was like, boy, this is really, I lost control. And then the conversation never went in any kind of direction I wanted it to. Like, it just got like more and more like information that I actually wasn't seeking at all. But I'm really glad I did it. And so I don't know if that's encouraging or not, but I would say the level to which it didn't go the way I wanted to. It was so profound. But that my dad showed up and did it was so cool. Like, there was something so amazing about it. And so, like, I just can imagine if you haven't seen your parents for 6 years, it's gonna be like, it's like I'm laughing because it's like there's an irony or absurdity or all these words you can use for like of course it's probably not gonna go right, right. And of course you're going to want to control it. I mean, I'm sitting on that bench with my dad and I'd be like, wow, how did we even get to what he's talking about? Like I didn't like it was so far-fetched from any kind of intention. But it was like that's the karma. Like that was how the karma unfolded. But I would I had wished that I had built in a little bit more recovery time than I had with that situation. I had to go kind of right back to teaching at IMS, like like 3-month retreat. So like it was like I think I would have built in a little bit more space, and I would hope that you do that, that you build in support and and good for you, like courage, just like so much courage when you're up for it, you know. And like Jesse said, of course you want to control it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
I
not sure that
and
story is that encouraging, but
yeah,
it couldn't have gone as worse as mine went. Like I was just sitting there like, how could this like go so like bad? Like, but like there was also a level to it, which is like, I'm so grateful that he showed up and I'm grateful I tried, you know? Like they say better than nothing, right? It was awesomely better than nothing.
um, thank you.
Yeah.
Will be something for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Karen, do you have a question there? Hey, can you
Well,
unmute?
in
Great.
some ways you've answered this, but I can't seem to let go of it. So, um, and it is related to the election. We moved in August. It's been very difficult, and we are in the middle of building an ADU behind us so we can actually afford the rent. And the man who is doing that with us, we work so well together. I mean, it's just, I love this guy, and he's a Trumper. We tried to talk, and he was so far away that I didn't feel like I didn't want to hate him. And I told him I had to stop talking about it because I wanted to still love him. And we hug and stuff. I mean, it's not like a regular contractor. I know his wife, I let them go down to the RV. I mean, it's just been we talk every day. We figure out what's happening. But I'm so scared of after the election with him because if Trump wins, I'm going to be so upset. I'm sorry, but my life has more or less been around justice. And, you know, what do we do 50, in the civil rights movement to have it end up here? And I know it intellectually, why and all that stuff. And my joke is the whole country is Mississippi now. But I just, I just dread it because I don't really want it to come between us, but I know if we win, he's going to take it really hard. He listens to podcasts all day, right-wing podcasts, when he's working. He turns them off as soon as I come in, you know, and I don't know. I have quite a few people in my life that are voting for Trump, and I really care about them. And this is so close. He comes Monday through Friday. Why is the election on Friday? Yeah, but so I don't know how to, when you say Buddha, your attachments to things, that's why I'm here. And I totally appreciate the ideas and the heartfeltness that you guys portray when you put it there, put it out. But I guess I just want it to be still safe. I depend on him. He depends on me. And we do care about each other. We joke, you know. He always says, I'm not going to paint it camouflage, you know, stuff like that. Just human stuff. But I'm so upset about, it's almost like I'm focusing the election. I'm so upset about the election. And then to have this, it just, I'm crying now. So
It's good to cry. I mean, I really feel like it's important to cry. It's sad, you know? It's very sad.
yeah,
I mean, bottom line is, at the least,
yeah,
we to be able to allow the tears and allow the sadness about it is part of the teaching, right? You know, not
I
that
haven't been able
that
to cry about it, so I understand now why when other people were asking their great questions, I thought I don't really need to ask this, but I see now that I do.
yeah, it's like this I was on the phone with my sister the other day, and she said that she tries never to cry. She never cries because she's afraid she's not going to stop crying if she starts. And that's like so sad,
Yeah, I did
right?
that for a long time.
Yeah. And so there's like the human emotional world that it's important, the sorrow, you know. And I said something probably not that helpful to her because, you know, she doesn't practice in the way, but I said, you know, sometimes sorrow feels bottomless. And that's when you feel like you're afraid to, you know, to cry because it'll feel bottomless, right? But it will end, right? It does. But it not clearly we're living in times that are so poignant. It's like that how our identification with who we want to win is create such a separation, right? Like that, the level that you're describing of fear, of loss, of the relationship, you know, and the fear of what's going to happen afterwards. I'm glad you brought it up because it's all in the room, like it's all happening for everybody. I think that again, it's going to take you care about this person enough. I would say you care about this person enough to live through it and to let it be painful. Man, you know, it's going to be painful. It's like
For
he
either
might,
for one or the other of us, it's going to be extremely painful.
right. And that's that whole thing about winners and losers and the whole way this has been handled. It's horrible. It's horrible. And there's do the best you can to like live through it. And it might be him that has to pull back because he can't bear the pain of it,
Yeah,
right? You're expressing it, you're feeling it, you're like letting yourself live through it. And that's we're all having to do that. And it like having the guts to live through this. Phew, it's really tough. It's really tough.
it's uh, it's really hard to love somebody,
That's
both him and his wife. You know, when they're doing something that much of me think is abhorrent. You know, and I don't know. I can't really change that feeling, honestly. I mean, the more I listen, I can't even listen to him anymore. And you know, and when we try to talk about my partner, she started crying because it was so far apart that there wasn't any way. His set of information was completely different than mine. We were in different languages completely. And I realized I can't, this is not somebody I can have a conversation about it with. And he's tried several times, and I've just said, I can't. I mean, it's just too far, you know? And, but then, I mean, I actually, God knows I want us to win, but I actually will feel really sorry for him.
Ah, that's,
You know?
you see, you're staying connected and your heart is feeling, and that you said it. You know, the question is, what is love?
Yeah,
What is love? And metta, the metta of the Brahma Viharas is basically based on just connecting to the felt sense of the person that's not considering the behavior, the compassion, the mudita, the equanimity. But the metta is basically, it's like finding the goodness in someone and wishing them well, right? It's like how you would relate to a newborn. It's like how would you relate to a newborn? And it's real metta in this case is really tough. But you're doing it because you love.
yeah,
And it's gonna hurt. It hurts like hell sometimes.
yeah. And then if
And it doesn't mean you don't do compassion for yourself and compassion for him and equanimity. You're gonna have to bring every tool that you have. Really.
every therapy session I've
Yeah,
ever,
yeah, like you're just gonna, yeah, it's a test. This is a test.
oh God.
It is. Look at
Yeah,
what we're,
no. I know
if
that's
you,
why I've been dreading it, because I really
right.
don't want to blow it up. I just really don't. And I like these other people that they're not in this community, but they're down at the coast. And, you know, one of them told me their father was in the Klan. She's from South Carolina, you know? And then she said, but they always thought that black people were happy. And we haven't had a chance to get together again. But I so want to say, why did you need the Klan if they were so happy? You know? And it's just these things, but you can't undo South Carolina. I know that because I saw it. And yet I still care a whole hell of a lot about all of them.
You can, this is the thing about love, and this is why the Brahma Viharas are so helpful, because it distinguishes between the without conditions love, you love them unconditionally, but the behavior, you head down the Brahma Viharas to equanimity, and it's holding ourselves accountable and others for behavior. And that's a paradox. It's paradoxical, but it's real. It's real.
There
And
was
it's
a really,
very, very challenging,
there
very
was a
challenging,
really
but you,
bad series on Buddha's life. I don't know, it was like a soap opera, 100 episodes and everything. But when you said that, I learned a lot from it actually, and I wish I could watch it again. I mean, it was totally trash, but it was totally good too. And and you know, his father kept starting wars, and yet he still loved his father. You know, he didn't hate the Brahmins, even though they treated the untouchables terribly. But he did let the untouchables into his ashram. You know, it's that. His modeling to me, seen from this very weird series. But, you know, it just doesn't, somewhere, I know it's what you've been teaching is that love is it. You know,
I think I just want to highlight, Karen. It's like you're doing it. You're doing this thing. This is the thing. This is it. Like this, what you're describing and also that you're describing it in a way that's like natural. It's not like you're, most people, more commonly you hear it's like, oh, how do I practice metta for these people, but how do I practice metta for these people, for that person? You're like, you have this natural care for this person, right? That is real. It's like, it's so real, you love this person and you are able to connect with his goodness, and that you have like really different views about a lot of things in the world, and that those are not just
They're not
they're not trivial. Yeah, exactly. These are views that acted upon have real consequences. And so what you're trying to do, I think what Michelle is describing, it's like what you're doing, of course, it's more confusing, it's more awful, and it's more heart-wrenching. That sense of like, it would be so much easier to do what most people seem to do, right? Which is to be like, these are the monsters, right? These are the bad people, and we are the good people. And that's just like this easy thing. And that is what enables all kinds of abhorrent behavior between any peoples, right? And for you to really get that there is so much that is abhorrent, that's scary, that's all of the things you're opposed to, and yet there isn't this sense like that this person and family and like that sort of like broadening circle is like not outside of the sphere of your care and your love, and like it's the most important thing right now and probably ever, right? It's like, if there's any way forward, what you're describing and what you're experiencing has to be at the center of it. It doesn't mean that we don't try to create a world based creating the conditions and the control and the amount of like, all these things we were just saying, right, with a different question but similar. It's like you still need to create a social conditions that are safe and that are supportive in a way that feels, aligned with your values. And it doesn't mean you relinquish that, but to hold people in your heart in the way you're doing it, it's very moving and it's very important. And really, I'm so glad you kind of offered that to all of us as a just a really important example of what really we all need to be doing, in these times.
It might be harder if Trump wins. I don't know. I don't know which
It
is
doesn't matter. I mean, if Trump wins or if
doesn't matter.
Harris wins, there's going to be the fact that you love each other, right? It's actually not just your love for him. The fact that you love each other is what is going to, the only thing that will prevent harm, violence, whatever, right? You don't know. It's not like a guarantee of anything. But
Yeah.
if there is anything that's going to prevent more harm from coming, it's going to be the capacity for people to love each other based on disparate views, with not love each other regardless of views,
Yeah.
and that's just as much for him as you, right? And who knows, it's like these things don't feel secure, they don't feel stable as we would like them to be, and yet this is it. It's the only thing that will protect the world from the pain of one or the other side losing, right? And the inability of whoever to be able to attend to that pain,
Well, thank you so much, both of you. I'm so surprised that I started crying, but I'm so glad I did, because that's something that I need to attend to, is my sadness, not just about Jim, but about the whole damn thing,
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Here, 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 here. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Like Jennifer's raised her hand. Michelle, does it
We have
feel?
time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, nice to see you both. My question follows up on the last question, and it has to do particularly with right view. And I think this context is a great context because We're thinking about kind of the stakes of this election, the racist rhetoric on one side, sort of the calls to violence, etc. And actually in a larger context in which both candidates are actively supporting a genocide. I guess the sort of what was helpful for me in sort of listening and digesting the last responses to extend love sort of across particular views, and where I get stuck. And that seems like a great aspiration. I don't think I'm quite necessarily there in the same way that Karen is. I will strive to bring more Karen into my life and kind of that capacity to love across difference the way that you are, Karen. I guess it seems like it really slips into kind of the both sides. Like everybody has their truth. It's all co-equal. There's no sort of place from which we can evaluate if one position is sort of more morally just. And I just don't think that's true. And that's also a view, but it is a sort of useful view, I think, based on what it enables in the world. It's almost like the sort of practices that follow from that view, that I want to pursue a path that reduces harm, that creates the conditions for flourishing for the most number of people, that fight against genocide, that call out and contest racism and other forms of discrimination. That it seems like I don't know, how do I hold sort of both this teaching around view? I guess what I understand around view is that the attachment to the view causes suffering. But maybe so I guess I'll just say, like, how do I hold those things?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, I feel like this is, like you said, related and to the way a lot of us are feeling. There's a whole spectrum of the question of views and right view and wrong view, and then views in general as something to be careful about. I think to hone in terms of like this kind of conversation, I do want to be careful of saying, like, I don't think that we have said anything about that there's like an equivalence of views, or that in fact, I think kind of, especially like what Michele said, of like there's caring outside of views, regardless of views, right? So it's not about like you're caring about all views equally or people's views equally. It's like a caring that is not about views and isn't dependent upon shared views. And then there is the equanimity practice she described, which is the recognition that there's actions that are harmful, there are actions that are beneficial, and that we are the owners of our actions, and that those things matter, and that's not irrelevant, and that how to hold those things, the equanimity and the loving kindness, the equanimity being an understanding of ownership of action and responsibility and ethical behavior. That's hard for the heart, to hold both of those things. But kind of like Karen was saying, it's like, actually, as soon as the views start to be what the conversation is about, it's very hard to find, it's hard to find that, come back to the love, because it's too upsetting, it's too jarring, it's too dissociative of like where you can find that place of connection, and that the place of caring often has to happen outside of views. And I would say more and more these days, the caring based on views actually has started, for me, I'd say, to feel of a more brittle thing than I would have anticipated in the past. That actually views are not actually a great place to shared views is not always actually the most secure place to think that we're building a sense of actually shared caring in the same way. A little bit of a side. But anyway, that's the notion is that we love, not, and it's like, it has to do with action, doesn't have to do with views. It doesn't, right? That there is something about a human being that we recognize, right? We recognize their goodness, we recognize their caring, we recognize things that are valuable and beautiful in them, right? And worthy of caring. And usually that there are often times where that has to come at a little bit of like a boundary around what conversations we might be getting in with people, right? So if you're talking kind of abstractly about people in your notion or mind, or you're talking about people who you're actually like physically in, in a space that you're engaging with, those are different practices, right? The ability to actually care about someone who's right in front of you, who you may have different views about, but that your relationship doesn't need to be dependent on that. Well, that is a practice, and that's a certain way of doing it. How do you practice in the sort of abstract notion of like this group of people, and caring about them when you are defining that group by a certain view? That's a harder trick for the heart to try to buy into, because you're setting it up as a place that is hard to get past, right? Like you're setting up the contrariness as like the notion, the thing that you're trying to penetrate with love versus like a direct human experience, does that feel, I don't know, does that sort of range of things feel helpful or attentive to?
Yeah, I think for me, the sticky point is less being able to care across different viewpoints. That seems like a horizon of possibility around metta that I can imagine, even if it's challenging to enact. I think where I get stuck is sort of the sense that sometimes not, I don't think you necessarily created an equivalence between all views, but there does seem to be this sense sometimes that, oh, like our side has one set of views and this other side has another set of views, and attachment to view is unskillful, and it causes division and polarization, and so therefore it becomes difficult to say, well, we should be aligned with this set of views. That's the part that I get tripped up on, less than the like how to expand. I mean, on an abstract level, I'm on board for metta without bounds, metta regardless. Even though
I wouldn't defend that proposition that you're describing of someone saying that sort of equivalence. I mean, it's not that I don't think views are, there's layers to it, but I'm just, I think that maybe you're just right and you shouldn't worry about it. I mean, the Buddha had views. The Buddha was like, this is wrong. You should not go to war. He was like, it wasn't like he didn't have views. It wasn't like he didn't have an opinion. So I just don't think that that's really part of like what we're.
The cherishing of an opinion will lead to a kind of righteousness that is unnecessary in a way. It's like, I think that it's like where I have a pet peeve is often around saying mindfulness is a non-judgmental attention, and it's not mentioned that it's actually a discerning. You're discerning. It's a discerning attention, and it's the same with this. It's like it's discerning if a behavior is harmful. That's not a view. That's a fact. That behavior is motivated by hate and it's harmful, right? I don't see that you would make that equivalent to a behavior that isn't harmful. So
the Buddha was very clear in warning against a kind of nihilism, that nothing matters, right? I mean, that was like one of like the however many views that are considered like really bad, right? This idea that there's no morals and things don't matter. And so I just don't think that that's I don't think I share enough of the view that you're describing that is frustrating for you to be able to like defend it or argue against, because I agree. I think and yes, I mean, we should be humble, we should be careful about like this, there is something about what does attachment to view mean, and does that mean that we're willing to enact violence in order to sustain, to have our view win. You know, the attachment to view can look like a lot of things, and there is something important about being like, we may not know the answer of like how to resolve a certain conflict or how to fix a certain problem in our society, even if we're opposed to a certain thing. There is something often that's helpful about like being humble and careful about our fixedness of views and our sense of self-righteousness and our for sure. So I don't want to say that I don't think that there's nothing to look at in terms of those things, and that in order to actually come to some sort of agreement between people of different views, that there is likely, and in my experience often, a need to put some things a little bit on the back burner so that you can find out where there is a sense of shared values, where you can actually meet people and care about them and build from that, rather than simply getting together and like arguing about everything and whoever wins, gets what they want. I mean, I do think that there's things to explore in that question, for sure.
It's a very important distinguish. It's important to distinguish what you're saying. Very important. It's like there's 3 feral cats, and one, it doesn't really feel like she knows the difference between right and wrong when it comes to like attacking the other cats. And it's like, that doesn't mean that you go along with it. You try to prevent the behavior, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like that's a different species, but it's the same principle, that if someone doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, you don't agree with that view. You can still love the being. I love this cat, but she definitely wears out my patience sometimes. But I feel like that it's a good example of like watching that play out with a non-human being. It's easier, but I feel like it can be stupefying when you realize that there are people that don't know the difference between kind of harming and non-harming. It's very painful.
Great,
think
thank
this,
you.
yeah, I feel it's so important. And I'll say more like personally is like I think there's been so many things over the last, whatever, feels like since COVID in particular, but just like these places where we find ourselves in such opposition to others in our lives, or more abstractly. But I think more particularly, it's like this thing about people in our lives, and like that I feel more hesitant about rupturing relationships because of a disagreement on views. It doesn't mean I won't do it or haven't done it or probably still continue to do it, but that I get how quickly that can happen, and the cost of that, and like what is the value of some of these things. And I do one thing is like, this is now way before that. When we were in Burma, and it was after that sort of at that point kind of more recent genocidal acts towards the Rohingya, that the Burmese government was involved in, and which included Aung San Suu Kyi, right, as some part of the, who knows how power was working with the military and her as democratically elected. But when we were there, this was like very visceral. It was really alive. It was really of the men. Every time going there has always been this sense of like having to wrestle with the ethics of what does it mean to go and try to practice and be in relationship with people, and to spend money and do things in a, you know, in a government that's run by a military, right? Anyway, there's all kinds of layers of that. And then this year of that was it was so intense. And there were just so many layers of relationship under which it was like, where was it important to bring this to the front for? Where was it important to not? And how are those decisions made? And how imperfect we all are in that, and how imperfect I feel like I was. And I will say that, so like on one hand, there was a person that we had worked with for many years who in a very who I got into a conflict with in an inappropriate place, right? We were visiting a monk, and it was just so, I don't know, inappropriate. It was a complicated place to have this amount of conflict arise. And it broke our relationship, and it broke her relationship with our organization and with the retreat. It wasn't explicit, but that's definitely what happened. And there are places where sometimes you cannot work with people because they just have because there's some place of value or some place of where the other person thinks is each other are delusional, that like you can't move forward. And I'm not sure that this was that. You know, I'm not sure that it was worth the cost of that relationship, that friendship. I'm not sure it was my place to break that relationship because it was like a institutional thing, right? Not just me. There were other places where I decided not to bring it up, where I was like, my decision to give dana to certain monks or certain nuns was not going to be based on whether they agreed or not with my understanding of the Rohingya crisis and what was happening. And there were other relationships where like I could have conversations with people and they were fruitful and they were meaningful, and we both, you know, were able to learn and grow in that. And this is 10 years later, and I'm not resolved about all of those aspects of it. But I saw that spectrum, right? And then in a situation that had nothing to do with that, there was someone else who worked with us who it was like actually their behavior was inappropriate and we had to cut them loose. And it was like, that was the deal. It was like, you know, we had to, there was nothing wrong. There was no way to fix, you know, the consequences of this person's actions, you know, for our retreat. And so, and we couldn't trust them, you know. So it was like, okay, we had to cut them loose. And so and that was like, good. You know, we're not, this sense of we don't expect every relationship to always come to total resolution about everything. And that sometimes you break and it is necessary. Sometimes you break and it's like, I don't know. I don't know if that was worth it. Sometimes you just don't attend to things. Sometimes you do. And that we're all wrestling. It's important to wrestle and it's more complicated, and it's not like a 100% easy answer. But I think that, you know, I appreciate you bringing it up and everyone bringing up these sort of elements of it today, because it's just alive for all of us in so many fronts. And we care. I mean, that's the ultimate thing of like when we're angry about something or we're fearful about something, it's like we care. And how do we find our way back to that feeling and that recognition that even our, you know, indignation can be, it's like, can we also remember that it's rooted in caring? And what does it feel like? And what does it feel like to come from that place when we're interacting? How hard it is, you know, when we're really triggered and things feel really volatile and so much is at stake, you know? So this sense that we're all trying our best, you know, and that's humbling.
I think just to add one sentence in that, it's easier to throw somebody out of our heart it's much harder to keep them in our heart and set the boundary. It's very painful. And so that's hopefully what we're all practicing.
Thank you both. I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody.
Mm.
Good luck this week.
Yeah, we'll see you next Sunday. We're ready. We'll be ready.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.